Hello, everyone. Oh, I love the energy in here. How y'all doing? Good, amazing. Well, we are going to really get into it with this panel. I was speaking to Paul back there, and he said, let's go deep immediately. Let's get to it. Let's talk about it. So I'm game. Paul, let's discuss. You know, mental fitness and mental health is genuinely a performance enhancement tool.
Yeah.
And I think this has been very life-changing in your life.
Yeah.
What aspects have truly changed you?
Oof. Well, therapy, I would say, has been one of the primary tools to learn something called perspective as an athlete, which, by the way, most of us don't have and is a good thing for a long period of time. Athletes have tunnel vision, and a lot of times their identity gets wrapped up in their performance and who they are and how they perform, and that's why they're really good, but the rubber meets the road and you have to evolve. Life comes at you. So that's where therapy was an unlock for me. I like to look at the man with 11 rings, Phil Jackson. He's known as the Zen Master. His focus for the Chicago Bulls and the Lakers was flow state. How am I going to get my players into a flow state? That's why they meditated before games. That's why he never criticized bad plays during games. There's moments for practice where you can do that. But your job as a coach, and that crosses over to the business world, is to try to make sure your colleagues are in flow state. We acquire our physical attributes and our motor skills. That's why we become pro. Everyone here is a pro and elite at what you do. So what you need to reach is a place of calmness and zen so you can access all of those skills that you spent so much time to nurture.
No, that's a great answer. I want to stick there with flow state for a minute because Deepak, give it up for Deepak Chopra, everybody. Deepak, flow state is something that we hear a lot about, and I'm sure it is much easier said than done. What exactly is flow state, and how can you tap into that to really unlock your potential?
So every athlete has experienced the flow state. They call it peak moments in athletics. Human experience moves from what we call survival and safety to adaptation, adaptation to thriving, thriving to flourishing, and flourishing to flow, and then flow to awakening. In the flow state, there's no time. In the flow state, everything slows down. In the flow state, you don't hear anything. There is effortless spontaneity, no resistance, no seeking, no defensiveness, effortless spontaneity. And athletes know that. They get to the place where the ball is going to come before the ball comes, etc., etc. But if you sustain that, what we call the peak state, that becomes, ultimately leads to awakening, where you do less and accomplish more, and ultimately do nothing and accomplish everything.
That's a great answer. Anybody in here experience flow state? Amazing. That's really good to hear, because I'm sure it took a minute to be able to get to that point. So that's great. I think for you, Carla, how have you prioritized mental health? And what do you see about that mind-body connection when it comes to business?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I go back to actually what you were saying, Paul, that like if you look at us over here, you're going to say which one of these is not like the other, right? Like I was an athlete before I was a business person, but I'm not a professional athlete. But in some cases, business people are like professional athletes, because we do, and particularly if you're a leader, you've actually got to keep your mind clear. You're dealing with people day in and day out, different personalities. You've got to be ready for whatever comes at you. So you've got to try to stay as much as you can in that state of flow. And for me, actually, when I think about that state, and wellness in general, it's not just the mental, it's the physical, it's the mental, it's the financial, frankly. It's all of it, right? All of your life. And so from my perspective, I've actually been on a personal journey in the last 3.5 years. I've lost, as you know, boss, about 75 pounds. And it has been dramatically life-changing from a mental health standpoint for me, because of the way that I feel about myself. And it's allowed me just to center myself as well. So my mental health actually came from getting better from my physical perspective. And so I really feel like much more grounded today than I did in the last 3.5 years, and much more prepared, frankly, to go into those hard conversations whenever I have to have them, because I am in a better place.
Well, I think what Carla just talked about was the state of mind first, right? Before you ever accomplish anything in the world, you have to have the mindset to accomplish it in order to go there. So you merely don't become successful if you don't have a mindset of success. So the moment you decided you wanted to lose weight 3 years ago, that was something you made up in your mind that was going to be no deterrent that lost you to the 75 pounds to continue to keep going. So that's why you have to train your mind the same way you train your body. And so often, so many people think that they're just training their physical, but the mental is the biggest component of all of it, because you have to continue to condition yourself to get better and better and talk those positive reconditionings to yourself every day when things get difficult in order to get yourself to that next phase, because it's a day-by-day thing. It's not a year-by-year. An athlete looks at the day-by-day. Ultimately, that's how you win a championship. That's how you win in goals, is every day you're trying to get better. You're trying to win every day. And so that's the mental health that gets you better. I personally like that approach versus the massive goal. You can have the big goal, that's great, but if you don't have the day-to-day things, you will never be successful. And that's how you can say 75 pounds down 3.5 years later, because you trained your mind first and you said this is what you were going to accomplish, and that's how you got to that goal.
Well, I like what Justin said there around resilience. So there's this misconception that athletes win all the time, especially the top ones. They don't. And if any of you all saw Roger Federer's commencement speech at Dartmouth, he gave a couple of stats that I found really interesting as I explore this idea. He's won over his career 80% of his matches he's played, but only 54% of his points. So there's a couple things you learn from that. Right? He loses just about half of the time, and he wins the ones that matter. But that volume of losses that someone like Roger Federer or Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan, who's missed over 9,000 shots, or Kobe Bryant, who didn't score a point the first time he played high school basketball, or I should say youth basketball, is that great athletes, great professionals, I see it in sales, I see it in advertising, we actually build our best selves by creating resilience and overcoming loss and obstacles. And in today's day and age, I see more and more people running away from failure, and this fear is enlarged, whether it's social media or the conversation portal that continues to spin around us. So make sure you step out and put yourself in a position of high risk, and over time, you'll look back and you'll have 54% of the points won, 80% of the matches won.
So I want to stick there really quick. This is for both Deepak and Boss. Deepak, I'll start with you. Paul sort of touched on these more modern, contemporary things that we are seeing that could also then influence how we view ourselves, our mental health, our mentality. What are some things in today's modern age that can make it more difficult for people to tap into their mental health?
Today's modern age, we've sacrificed ourselves for our selfies, basically. You're always looking for approval, validation. I personally start my day with 4 intentions. Number 1, joyful and energetic body. Number 2, and I put my attention on my body. Number 2, loving, compassionate heart. Number 3, quiet, creative mind, because I'm saying that because most people think you have to have a positive mind, but a positive mind is a noisy mind. A negative mind is also a noisy mind. What you need is a quiet mind, because that's where creativity comes from. And finally, lightness of spirit, lightness of being, lighter than the wind, lighter than space. You start your day with those 4 intentions, and then everything is synchronized around those 4 intentions. Those 4 intentions go deep into stillness. Stillness is the important thing, and that's been emphasized. But, things like positive thinking, having hope, they're oxymorons. Hope signifies despair. When you say be hopeful, it automatically implies you are in despair. Positive mind, you're trying to be a Pollyanna. It's not natural. It's nothing more exasperating. But a quiet mind is the key.
A quiet mind. Boss, what would you like to add? What have you seen in your training that also signifies the things that make this difficult?
I just feel like people are trying to compete with other individuals and not, I love competition because I believe that we compete to uplift, not compete to destroy. And so a lot of times there's this comparison across the board that isn't fair because we all have different circumstances. And so those circumstances either weigh in your favor or out of your favor based on who you're competing with versus going and competing and being your best self and allowing others to rise and push you to the next occasion. I think that social media has played a big component in that because everybody is trying to put on and be something that they're not versus being who you authentically are and showing up as that person every time. And one of the things that Deepak said, I think your mind has to be in control chaos at all times because you have to be in control, but your mind has to continue to go forward to be creative and think about the opportunity that's afforded next to you. But I call it control chaos. Control chaos creates the opportunity, but you have to be positive and self-inflicted within yourself to go for that next goal, for that next opportunity. That's kind of how I've, built it and valued it.
No, that's a great answer.
Can I just
Carla,
jump
for
in
you?
on
Oh,
one quick
absolutely.
thing? Because I think this quiet piece is really, really interesting. Can I just ask this group, how many of you guys feel like you have enough time in your day between meetings and all the stuff you do to actually have a little bit of quiet? Okay, more than I thought. Okay, so really well done to those, because I actually think that there's something really interesting in that. In my career, I used to think that just being busy, like going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, was the right way to do it. And I found that, in the last few years where I say, can you please just give me some time in my calendar? Every day, just some time, even if it's a half an hour, just to kind of think, settle, reset before the next thing, I think is really important. So for those of you that aren't doing it and do have a little bit of control of your calendar, I think this notion of quiet and stillness is really, really interesting. Just have a few moments to yourself to reset for the next thing is really, really important.
That's easier said than done, Carla.
It is. But you just said be deliberate, right?
Yeah,
be deliberate.
Yeah, but it's tough for
I know.
people to be deliberate when they have, but I agree with you. I'm in line with you. I'm just saying I know it's going to be difficult.
It's very hard. That's why I said
so
half.
basically, I
Shall
have a
we give
question.
everybody an experience of quiet mind?
I would love that.
Okay.
Perfect.
You guys, are you finding this conversation interesting? Okay, so now I'm going to ask you the same question, but don't answer till I raise my hand. Agreed? Are you finding this conversation interesting?
Yes.
So the question is a thought, the answer is thought. In between is your quiet mind. It's the space between your thoughts. Right now, as you're listening to me, just be aware of that which is listening. There's a presence there. It's not your mind, it's your spirit.
I took a course of Deepak's 10 years ago in Boston. I was sitting here just like everyone and learned, as I was fearful of meditation, not feeling like I could quiet my mind, that it's actually the act of sitting outside of yourself and watching your mind go and being okay with it. And as I hear you all talk, this whole festival, this moment right here is our mind. We have people having food over there, people walking there, an ambulance goes by, there's bass in the back, and then you all are sitting nice and quietly and listening. And I feel like a lot of times I'm at war with my own mind, all this stuff happening at once.
But what do you do when you feel that?
I think observe it, and you have to accept it. There's no growth without pain and sort of the oxymorons as Deepak had acknowledged. But observing is the best thing that we can do, and accepting, embracing, and then going out and doing. And I think that's a big piece of what athletes may feel come natural, because the act of doing, having the discipline to do it consistently and doing the mundane isn't really at large what is all that exciting. Doing the same drill every single day, hundreds of times, but you build a relationship with 1 inch, 1 second, 1 mile, 1 year at a time. And the math checks out. Over a long period of time, you become what you set out to hopefully accomplish.
What you just said is expressed in one phrase in wisdom traditions, and that is the highest intelligence is the ability to observe yourself without judging yourself. That automatically creates a quiet mind. Observing yourself without judging yourself. And there's a formula to that. It's called STOP. S stands for stop. T stands for take 3 deep breaths. O stands for observe your breath. And P, proceed with awareness and compassion. That's it. Stop.
I love hearing all of these, these tools that they implement to be able to be stronger mentally, because I think as we grow, the things that we are taught are not always this. It seems like you learn it so much later in life, even though it would be very advantageous to you to learn it early so that you were equipped with resources to be able to attack the world in the way that you should. So, Carla, what are some conventional thoughts about mental health that you would like to challenge? Some ways that we should no longer speak about it and how we should shift towards more progression?
I mean, I think that would be probably the biggest challenge is let's not talk about it. Like, why are we not talking about it? It's funny when I reflect on myself as a leader and thinking about a word that is now, I think, overused a little bit in business, the word empathy. And I remember before COVID, the word empathy was like, you're a nice person, right? You're being too nice. I see all the women were nodding and smiling. And empathy does not equal nice. Empathy just means, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, understanding where they're coming from so that you can help solve problems together or think about, really like understand them, even if they're different than you. And I think that from my perspective there, like it's so important to think about that, because I'll give you a small example. I was during COVID, we had a Zoom meeting. Everybody is on the screen. And I remember that one woman who was usually vibrant, always talking, was really silent in a meeting. And I could have just, walked by it and just been like, it's not a big deal, it's COVID, whatever. But I just noticed there was something off about her, something off. And I just had enough sort of in my head to, after the meeting, get a hold of her and say, is everything okay? And I remember just that question, is everything okay, resulted in her totally opening up and telling me that it wasn't okay. Something, she was living by herself, it was a small apartment, she was like all the feels that everyone was feeling during COVID. And the reason I bring that up is because I had enough empathy to notice that something was different with her. I stopped to kind of ask her and gave her the permission to talk about a moment that something was bothering her. And so I made that sort of bad moment for her in her feeling from a mental health perspective feel okay to talk about. And so for me, I think we can't separate. We tell people, bring your whole self to work. Well, you can't bring your whole self to work and then ignore half of yourself and not talk about the part of you that actually is really impacting your performance as a leader. So I think one of the things I would challenge is we can't not talk about mental health.
Absolutely. And it's also, the fact that we are up here doing it continues to show the steps that we are taking to be open about how we all feel and how we react to the world as well. Boss, for you, why is it important to implement grace and empathy even when you are training?
One of the key things for me is trying to seek understanding. I think one of the things that I love to do, I talked about it earlier, is competing to uplift and finding where someone is in their current moment to build them up. We're talking about mental health, and one of the things that's important to me is identifying mental illness and mental weakness. I think they're getting sometimes put in the same bucket, but identifying both of them is a key component. Is can you get better at something? And right now you just have a challenge versus there's an illness that you're going through something really difficult in life and so on and so forth. So for me in the whole training aspect, I try to meet people where they are, understand exactly the push and how I can pull out the greatness in them based on the conversation, whether it's training, whether it's again, it's the conversation of connectivity. But I definitely don't always go to I go to the highest point of a person versus the weakest point of the person. But at the same time, meeting them where they are while trying to pull the best out of them, because I don't subscribe to where you currently are, though I meet you where you are. I personally can't subscribe to there because I'm trying to get you to a higher level, but I first have to understand to get you to come where we're trying to go.
Yeah, looking to unlock that potential for sure. This one is for both Deepak and Paul. You know, when you are on the field, on the court, wherever, you can get high, you can get low. There's a lot of emotions out there. Deepak, how do you help athletes really regulate those emotions to make sure that they are helping them unlock their potential? And for you, Paul, how did you regulate your emotions?
There's a process called neuro-associative conditioning. So for athletes, what I do is I have them select their peak moments, and create a video out of that, which is only 3 or 4 minutes. They watch it, and then they tag it with a mantra. Mantra is an instrument of thought that takes you beyond thought. And so as they go to the court, all they have to do is repeat the mantra, and the memories of peak performance automatically appear. They can also use a smell, or they can use a hand gesture called a mudra. And this is called neuro-associative conditioning, and it actually changes the landscape of your brain. First, there's something called limbic resonance, which means your emotions resonate with the peak experience. Then there's limbic regulation. Your neural networks start to connect with each other. And finally, there's limbic revision, which means your neural landscape has changed for peak performance. And you don't have to think about it then, once you do that.
I listen to Deepak, essentially what I do. And I'll add maybe an example. In sport, we're very superstitious. And no one wants to talk about losing, but we lose a lot. And we think that if we talk about losing, then we're going to lose. But if you don't talk about not necessarily the outcome of losing, but things not going as planned, how are you going to have a plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E? You have to talk about those possibilities. We do that in the workplace. Don't do it on the field, but that is a gradual step to knowing, in my view, I'm at my present best performing state when I can acknowledge all the possibilities of this game of basketball that I'm about to walk into. The other thing is, my favorite sport to reference in way of goal setting is golf. All of the team sports mostly set goals around, having 30 points and 10 assists and 10 rebounds. And in my game, having 3 goals and 5 assists. And guess what happens when you get through the first quarter, shooting 0 for 4, turning the ball over 3 times? You get down on yourself and the trend continues. In golf, they celebrate what's called an up and down. Anybody hear what an up and down is in golf? Phil Mickelson has made one of the greatest livings of all time from hitting flop shots from the gravel over a tree onto the green and saving par. And we show those moments, but what SportsCenter doesn't show is his awful tee shot that put him in the gravel behind a tree away from the green. But golf has said, hey, let's celebrate how you respond to a bad tee shot. So when I was entering the second half of my professional career, I worked with my sports psychologist. I listened to people like Deepak and also built a relationship with turning the ball over. This was my opportunity to respond. Making a bad pass, this was an opportunity to pick up a ground ball. So how are you creating your up and down in whatever it is the field that you're in?
Golf is a spiritual game. It's mystery school for Republicans.
Amen.
All right, one more for you all. I just want you all to tell the audience what you hope and how you hope this conversation to progress in the next 5 years about what you can really tap into if you understand that where your brain is as equally, if not more important, as where your body is.
Who's the question, Bob?
What do you want this conversation to look like in 5 years about mind-body?
There's a place inside you, and it's not your mind. it's your spirit. Motivation never works because it's mental. Inspiration means in spirit. Two different things. You know, motivation, people get fatigued. Their mind gets fatigued. But to be in spirit is to be inspired, and there's no going back. It's like a child that's born that cannot return to the womb. So there's that space inside you, which is your spirit, where nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. Okay, so go beyond the mind. Forget the mind. And, you know, you can train the mind, because the mind is subservient to your spirit.
Boss?
That's a clap. I mean, yeah. I don't really know how to respond after that.
Like,
I think
hi?
that's it. I think that he said train the spirit. Get the spirit right and then train the mind. I got to go tap into my spiritual mind. I just said that wrong because it's not about the mind. It's about the spirit. And so you're absolutely right. That's a practice for me because I'm always mentally in my head. So I hope this conversation 5 years from now, I'm in a better place. I'm in a better place for spirit
You will
connectivity. Be. Yeah, that's exactly what I think this should be for me in 5 years.
Carla?
I mean, the thing that I would say is, you know, give yourself the grace to know that it doesn't happen overnight, and you can't just like what Deepak is talking about. You know, 5 years from now you might achieve, and that's going to be okay as long as you just are trying, right? Like as long as you're kind of moving yourself forward. So give yourself the grace. Like you're not going to wake up tomorrow and meditate and everything is going to be fine. Like it's a practice, obviously. I mean, it is a practice. It's a learned. You have to teach yourself that. And I too, like you, am not good at it at all. I don't give myself grace. I'm very hard on myself. I do, you know, always think about the negative that I did, not the positive that I did. I don't, you know, and so I do think that, you know, even just sitting up here listening to you speak, Deepak, I've already had like a few things that I can take back. And I do think, you know, hopefully in 5 years, if we are having this conversation again, you'll hear all of us feel like we're advanced. But give yourself the grace to really kind of work on yourself and give yourself the time to work on yourself. Because if you're not good, if you're not in a good place, particularly for those of you guys that are leaders, your teams won't be. Your families won't be. Your friends won't be. You need to be as good as you can be. So give yourself the grace and work on it.
Paul, close us out.
I hear this conversation, and for me, all I hear is like, I'm fighting being complacent. Like, you guys are saying give yourself grace, and I'm like, I got to go right now. You know what I mean? It's like the opportunities now, the opportunity. So you guys are so right. But in my mind, right, I just can't get over the idea and the purpose of like the now moment. And I just got to work. Like, it's like I don't know. It's just.
But I'll say this. I think life is rich. There's so many different things. And I'd mentioned my relationship to Deepak. Carla, I study her work. I hope to one day do business with her and learn from her. I listen to your show. I watch your show. And probably my most spiritual relationship in my career as an athlete was with my strength and conditioning coach. So your relationship with your athletes and pushing them to go is so important. And that is your role for a lot of them. And I would say that, you know, for me, the conversation might evolve and should evolve as a lot of this festival is loaded up with AI and where's it going to take us? And we're already wrapped around social media. It's hyper addictive and right on our phone. Whether our food becomes 3D printed, money rendered useless, a society where we opt in to a job or not, I think it'll come down to finding meaning. And so I try to check myself whether I'm on the hunt in business or focused previously on scoring goals is what is my sole purpose? What is life's meaning? I know that as humans, we can count on that and survive with that.
That's a great way to close us out. Please give it up for this very mindful panel. Thank you all so much, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.